All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I've got 70 slides to get through here, so we'll get cranking. So, as a kid, my dad and I were in the garage one day, and we're cleaning up, and he asked me to help him load some stuff out. And one of the boxes, he opens that up, and I still remember the smell, I still remember the sights. And inside was his comic book collection from when he was a kid, back in the 60s. And these were old Fantastic Fours, Batmans, Spider-Mans. We're talking some of the originals all just stored away in this old box. And as a kid, I was 7 or 8 years old at the time, and it was amazing for me. I got to go back in time and read all these old comics. And then it got me started on comics when I was a kid. And I graduated into X-Men and Spider-Man and Superman. And as I was going through these, and every young boy likes to read comics at some point, and superheroes, and you get into what is the superhero. You understand that superheroes are the distillation of all that humans want to be. You fly, you're super strong, you're super smart, you can see through walls. It's all these powers that humans wish they had, and so they put them into these characters. I had an opportunity to speak at Drupal Camp London about more of the developer aspect of why we're superheroes. And so this talk and this concept has kind of been rolling around in my head for a while. And what it's led me to believe is Drupal's actually pretty powerful. It's really, we're our own superheroes. This is Captain Drupal. He has his own Facebook page. But Drupal powers some amazing, amazing experiences in the world today. Tesla is a heavy, heavy user of Drupal. One of my fun facts about this website is the car can go 0 to 60 faster than the web page can load. And so that just tells you how awesome their car technology is and how bad their CDN is. You got sports, CrossFit games. This is one I was personally involved with, running decoupled Drupal to power not only the website, but all of the content and interactions and videos. And we would have, on announcement day for the workouts, we'd have 3 million people clicking refresh on the same page, waiting to get that workout. And you're sitting there going, I have 3 million people around the world watching my code load in their browser. Commerce. We're now doing billions of dollars in commerce with a B through Drupal. These are some amazing experiences. This is a Chinese company that powers their entire POS system off of Drupal commerce. And so my theory and my concept here is that to most of the world, what we do in Drupal is the equivalent of Superman flying. It's magic. When you go and talk to people about what you do and what you build, most of the time they don't understand it. I came to this realization last year after DrupalCon Vienna. I swung through Istanbul. And so the first night I was there, I was by myself. I said, I'm going to go smoke some hookah, drink some tea, kind of get into the culture. And so I wandered into a random hookah bar right next to the Grand Bazaar. And I sat down with 2 gentlemen, and we started talking. And they were asking me, what do I do? And I was explaining to them, well, I build websites. And the guy on the left there has a jewelry wholesale, and he sells jewelry, silver jewelry. He goes, oh, I've always wanted an e-commerce site. Can you build e-commerce sites? And I was like, yeah, they're kind of easy. He's like, well, how long does it take you? It's like, I don't know, I can get a basic one up in a couple of hours. He's like, well, how about hosting? Because I have a guy that's been working for years on my site. It's still not done, but every time he tries to launch it, the host crashes, and we're not able to see the web pages, and they're constantly up and down. And I was like, no, I've got buddies that run hosting companies, and the page will always be up. And I realized in talking with these guys that I was like, it was like sitting down and smoking hookah with Superman for them. Like, their minds were just exploding that this technology was so foreign to what they knew, but it was so easy for us. And so because what we do is the same as a superhero to most, we have the same level of duty and responsibility to use that power to protect people in what we do, not just build cool stuff. I like this quote. This is kind of what I look at the web as now. Is like some men are aren't looking for anything logical like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn. And because of that, we have a great responsibility with the power that we have to build websites, to build experiences, to use it for the better of mankind. Originally, this was the title, a discussion on responsible and reasonable security. It's morphed into responsible and ethical technology. Lately, I've been discussing with a few people outside of the Drupal realm, and more just talking about what are the ethics of technology? What is the purpose that we build what we build, and then what do we do with that power, and what can we, how can we make a change? If you haven't already heard Morten Rand Hendrickson talk, go look up this URL. I'll post the slides later. This guy is deep, and the WordCamp Europe in Belgrade a few months back, he presented a session called The Ethics of Web Design, and he goes into Aristotle and Plato and just all of these deep concepts of ethics and brings it back to how WordPress is building and shaping the web. The first time I've ever seen tears during the question and answer session, like people were crying. It was like a therapy session, and it was amazing. And so today I'm going to ask a lot of questions, but I'm not going to have an answer to all of them. And that's part of what I wanted to do today, is just kind of kick off some questions and have us think through it and then try to figure out what does it mean to have an ethical web, and how can we put ethics into the technology that we build. First off, I'm going to introduce you to my superheroes. This is my wife. She's my superhero because she takes care of these two guys whenever I travel. So this is Caleb on the left and Evan on the right. They're 4 and 2, and they are just madhouse of energy right now. But then to watch them interact with technology, you hand them an iPad, and Caleb knows how to get into it, and he has all of his apps, and he has his own little Fire tablet now, and he can get in there and do all this amazing stuff. And I keep thinking to myself, what is the web that I'm building now? How's that going to impact them when they grow up? Am I able to build the web now that I want my children to be on and be in the future? And so the ability to create this web and the ability to create content online also comes with the ability to manipulate content and manipulate people. Recently, we've been going through this quite a bit over in the US. Facebook and a number of folks banned Alex Jones and the InfoWars website, and from podcasting and Facebook and everything. But Twitter didn't. Twitter decided not to jump into that foray, and there was a lot of discussion around the power that these social media giants have around being able to put messages out there, whether they're good or bad. For those of you that don't know Alex Jones, he puts out a lot of conspiracy theories that a lot of the gun deaths that happen in the U.S. are fake, and that the dead children at the schools are actually crisis actors and paid for by the government. So really horrible, horrible stuff. And it wasn't until just recently that Twitter finally said, "That's it, you're done, you're off." And so now he is completely banned from all social media, all major web platforms. And it starts this discussion around, you build this technology, you build Facebook, and you build Twitter, and you don't expect that to happen. They didn't build Twitter thinking that Alex Jones was going to use it. You don't build Facebook thinking that Cambridge Analytica is going to be scraping 80 million people's data and then using it to manipulate and push not only social and discord within groups, they're pushing entire elections and pushing entire world history through these platforms. And so there's a lot of discussion going on now, especially in the US, around what is privacy and how private do we have to keep the data, and what are the responsibilities that these large social media firms have to not only protect their users, but also provide a platform that is free and open and able to be used. And it goes back to the Latin words of, and I'll butcher this, but it's quis gaudiet ipsos custodes, and it's who guards the guards, who watches the watchmen. We give all this trust to Facebook and Twitter that say, yes, you guys run these platforms and you have these policies, and you're going to make sure that it's a safe space and people can freely express themselves. But at what point do they need regulation? At what point do they need somebody to watch them? Because not every time they get it right. And what this comes into is big data is not just big data, it's a big responsibility. Think of the amount of data points that Facebook has on your daily life, that Google has on your daily life, that Apple has on your daily life. I wear an Apple Watch, I walk around with a phone, I have GPS, everything's tracking me, everyone's watching me as I'm browsing the web, they're constantly looking at what I'm doing. And this has led The Economist last year to publish an article that said, data is the new oil. The value of data in the world is now greater than the value of oil. And we need to start looking at data and big data and the folks that collect it, and how do we regulate that data, and who has that control, and who can sway the world with that data. How many people are familiar with Strava? It's a fitness app, so it tracks your jogs and your bike rides and kayaking and everything. And it's meant to track your fitness, and then you can share. It's a social network. They recently published, I think it was a few trillion data points into a heat map that showed this is where the world works out. That's pretty cool. Like, you can see, wow, like, New York has some pretty cool street maps. You can see all the streets and where people are working out the most and where they're not. You can see, Amazon rainforest, not a lot's going on there. Nobody's working out in the Sahara Desert. But one thing that they didn't think about was, as you start to scan the world, they were showing heat maps in the middle of Iraq, in the middle of Afghanistan. And those looked very familiar, but they weren't marked on any maps. Well, if you actually took Google Maps and then overlaid it, what they were finding was that military servicemen that were in secret black ops sites were using their Fitbits to track their daily jogs. And they were uploading that to the web, just like everything was happening. And so they go out and they publish this map, and they don't realize that they have now secretly revealed all of the hidden bases that the U.S. has across the Middle East. Obviously very controversial because, A, they're hidden bases that are doing secret stuff, but then also now the military has to go back and have a policy on Fitbits. Like, you're not allowed to wear a Fitbit in the Middle East now because you are giving away your location of where you're running. And so collectively, big data is starting to know more about us than we even know about ourselves. If you guys have seen the Google, the Selfish Ledger video, has anyone seen that? Go watch the Selfish Ledger video. It's a internal conceptual video that was created a couple years ago, but then secretly released this year. And Google is going through it saying, can we, just like genetics, there's a theory behind genetics and evolution that genes are selfish. And so the genes that end up evolving and showing through evolution are the selfish genes that make their way through. And Google's saying, can we create a selfish ledger of big data on you and extrapolate that to the rest of the world? And then can we use that to manipulate social behaviors in order to create the world that they want to live in and create a better place? And at face value, that's kind of cool. Like, if you can sit there and in the video they show somebody sets a resolution that they want to lose weight in the new year. And so Google says, well, I know this person is ordering an Uber, so I'm going to pop up a little alert and say, hey, why don't you walk? And then they watch their spending habits, and they even can look at their design. What colors do they like? What are they purchasing? And then they create a custom scale with the colors and the features that person would want. They 3D print it, and they put it for sale at the price that they know the person is willing to pay, because they've monitored all their pricing and everything. And so they discount it perfectly so that person can sell it. They can sell it to that person. And you start to think, that's a little creepy. And then they're wanting to mix in a little bit of AI with that to say, can we just let the system learn about you and deliver the best experience to you? This is actually run afoul in the U.S. One of our major retailers, Target, for a while, I don't know if they're still doing it or still doing it in a form, but for a while they were tracking every purchase that you made at their store back to a single data point. And so whether you used a credit card or you bought online or whatever you did, they would try to connect all the data that they could back to the main point. And this guy came into one of the stores and starts yelling at the manager. He's like, why are you sending me all of these pregnancy-related ads? I don't have any pregnant women in my house. I don't need diapers. I don't need baby carriers. And he starts getting really upset. Also because they were personalized with the name and everything to his 16-year-old daughter. Come to find out, what Target was doing is that they were watching everyone that signed up for the baby registry list, and they could know that not only when you sign up for the baby registry list, that happens around month 2 or so when you find out that you're pregnant, but then they can go back and look at your purchases prior to that and say, well, if they're buying vitamins, they're buying these fragrance-free oils and soaps, that means that they're pregnant, that they know they're pregnant and nobody else does. And so then they were able to preemptively send coupons to a pregnant woman to say, come buy diapers and car carriers. And so this dad got really angry, and he had to come back a week later and apologize, because he said, come to find out my daughter is pregnant, and she had been buying all that stuff without him knowing. And so Target knew that his daughter was pregnant before he did. That's the type of world, and that's the type of data that we're getting into. And it can be used for good. So Facebook has a feature that it analyzes what you post and the pictures and how you're saying it. And it'll pop up and it says, hey, it sounds like you're going through a difficult time. It sounds like you're about ready to harm yourself. Do you want to talk to somebody? Can we get you the help that you need before you need that? Now, on the flip side of this, you also have the Minority Report, the old movie with Tom Cruise, which is actually surprisingly coming more and more to realism, is that can we predict crime happening before it actually does? And can we use big data sets to prevent crime from happening? So in the US, we use this for terrorism, and they can monitor metadata in a lot of the communications and how does that play out. But they've also been able to use it with ancestry sites that are, you can submit your DNA to the ancestry sites and create this DNA profile. Well, the police are now able to go through that and solve years-old murder cases that they had DNA data, they just didn't have the DNA. And through mitochondrial DNA, they can say, well, this person's in the same family, and oh, by the way, that person was a suspect 20 years ago, and now we have a reasonable conclusion that this person could be the killer. And so they were able to collect their DNA and prove that this person committed a series of murders tens of years ago. 23andMe is a very popular product that does this. You spit into a little cup, you send it off, and then they come back and they say, Chris, you have red hair, blue eyes, based off your genetic profile, your family's from Germany and Ireland and all these different places. They're also now cleared from the FDA to start screening for certain cancers. So they're reading your genome and then sending back, hey, by the way, do you know that you're 80% more likely to have this cancer? And then just announced, and this is where they were going the whole time, was they're now taking their 5 million people that have sent them DNA, and they're now selling that and working with GlaxoSmithKline in order to create custom drugs that are genetically engineered to match certain diseases in certain populations. And they're sitting there going, we've got a treasure trove of ancestry data and DNA data that would take a lot of these pharmaceutical companies years upon years and millions of dollars to collect. And these people are paying us to take it from them, right? And so we now run into the what I'm calling the 80-20 paradox. In technology, we always build for the 80 and then worry about the 20% later, right? But what happens to that 20%? What about the 1%? Or the 1% of the 20%? Those people are impacted by the technology that we build in good ways and in bad. And it can have consequences that we just don't think about. So Facebook has a feature where on this day or 5 years ago, and it'll bring back pictures. Recently, it was my 4-year-old son's birthday, and so then every day I was getting these 4 years ago, and it was pictures of him being born and as a baby and everything. But then this occurs, and somebody says, hey, I don't want a reminder that my friend committed suicide 3 years ago to hop into my timeline every year. I don't want to be reminded of that. But Facebook doesn't understand that the impact of this amazing feature, they build it for the 80%, but there's 20% of people out there, or even more, that are saying, look at what you're sharing before you share it back with me. And so technology has the power to change millions and millions of lives. Like I was saying earlier, like with CrossFit, like we're out there publishing content for millions of people. And we can do that for the good, but we can also do it for the worse. And so it's up to us to do it. And I grew up in a long lineage of technologists. My grandpa was in IBM. My dad's on his 36th, 37th year at IBM now. And so growing up, learning to code before I was even in school, my dad always reminded me that computers are only as smart as the people who make them. And it's up to us to build that intelligence into the system. And it's up to us to think about, what are we building? Because it's not just, oh, we built this cool feature and the computer's doing something wrong. It's up to us to do that. And so because we have the power to change lives for the better, privacy is a community responsibility. It's up to us as a community of technologists, of Drupalers, of WordPress, of every flavor, to hold privacy near and dear. Which just leads us to GDPR. GDPR is here because basically we couldn't regulate ourselves, and so we needed a nudge. We needed a nudge from the government to say, you're not doing it right, you're treating the data wrong, you're not giving people the privacy that they deserve, and because of that, we're going to put in some legislation around it. Luckily, I'm a big proponent of GDPR. I like the legislation. Luckily, in the U.S., we're starting to get there, so eventually we will have some privacy-related laws and some GDPR-like functionality. And if you're looking for some great resources on GDPR, Heather Burns, this is a talk she gave at Front End United. She's going to be speaking here Thursday in Vanadium. And then the other thing is she was just announced that she's going to be in the open web panel tomorrow morning with Dries. And, tomorrow morning. And so go check that session out. Because what she does is, and I'm not going to steal a lot of the thunder away from it, but she looks at privacy through the views of American and European lenses. And she says, unless we can figure out how the two societies look and deal with not only privacy but government regulation, we're never going to come to an understanding or a consensus on how this will actually impact us and how we can actually build solutions that keep privacy in mind, that protect data and look out for the 20% and even the 1%. To me, I want to highlight what's going on in Drupal and WordPress. So in WordPress, Heather's part of the core privacy team, and they actually have privacy in core. And so plugins now can declare to this core API, here's the data that I'm collecting, here are the cookies that I am setting, here's everything that my plugin is doing. And then they have a really easy button that you click, and it will create a privacy policy for you that then lists out all the sub-plugins and what they're doing. It allows you to build that privacy policy, because part of the hard part, especially with WordPress, where you use a lot of plugins, is you don't know what those plugins are collecting. And a lot of the times, these plugins can have spyware or some sort of analytics that are going on inside of them. It's plug and play. It also has some GDPR compliance around right to be forgotten and data portability. That's all in core. How many folks have built GDPR compliant or hopefully GDPR compliant in Europe on Drupal? Right? Not too many hands raised because we don't know how to do it yet in Drupal. We've got some great efforts going on, but it's all handled in Contrib. It's handled amongst a scattering of modules. I looked up recently, the GDPR module only has 2,300 uses right now and 15,000 downloads. I wager to guess there's a little bit more than 2,300 websites, Drupal websites in Europe, and more than 15,000 developers developing on it. And what that says to me is that we can't handle this in Contrib. And we made that assumption as a community. We said, okay, we're not going to do this in core and we're going to handle it in Contrib. But Contrib hasn't been able to do that. And so to do it, everyone's going out and rolling their own. They're creating custom modules, and it becomes very fractured, and it's not very easy to manage and maintain. And so this isn't just a Drupal or a WordPress issue. It's how can we adopt common best practices to better the web? How can we make our platform, which powers millions of websites, impact the web for good? Combine that with WordPress, who has 30 million sites live now, and combined about, I think we're, between the two projects, almost 40% of the web runs on Drupal or WordPress. We have the ability as these two communities to really push what the web is doing and how the web treats the data that we collect. Because like it or not, the websites that you're creating, the websites that I'm creating, the websites that everyone's interacting with are collecting data. Drupal is handling sensitive data every single day. I see it in my day job, and I get called into situations where people are collecting credit cards through web forms and social security numbers and private identifiers in just basic forms. And you're sitting there going, okay, obviously the main user doesn't understand this. And the few developers that do go, oh, that's a bad idea, and they'll just walk away because they don't want to touch it. And so as a Drupal community, we can and we should do better to provide developers and site builders with the privacy-focused tools that they need. And it's not an easy thing to do. So I'm proposing that we need a core privacy initiative in Drupal just like they have in WordPress. And Heather and I have been talking, and we actually want to combine the two initiatives together to create a common set of privacy frameworks amongst the two platforms that will allow us to actually share ideas and share code, share standards. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Drupal right now is working on a code of ethics for Drupal. This is what we stand for. This is our ethos. WordPress is working on something similar. And so if we can combine those efforts, we can really impact a great portion of the web. And so I would say clients and consumers, they don't always ask for privacy. They don't always ask for security in their websites, but they expect it. They expect you know what you're doing with the data that they're giving you. And so, unfortunately, the webcam is blocking off some of that. But let's go out and build the web we want and that our children deserve. Because if we want to become more than a man, if we want to be the superheroes that we are, we have to commit ourselves to an ideal and live that out. So my name's Chris. My company's Locker. You can tweet at me here. And I think we have some time for questions, and I wanted to leave some time at the end here for questions. So yeah, any questions off the top? All right. Yeah.
Have you contacted the Drupal board about your initiatives?
We are working on that this week. So we're putting the proposal together. We've got it all buttoned up, and then we're going to be talking to them about creating a core team around privacy. What does that look like? Initially, we just need to describe it, right? And unfortunately, it's not something we can just snap our fingers and everything happens overnight. There is a groundswelling of folks in the community that are saying we need to have some sort of common effort here rather than just a bunch of contrib modules doing their own things. So that's one of my goals for this trip is to be able to start this process.
Have you reached out to Brainstorm? I believe that's a company behind the GDPR. Ah, yeah, okay, I was going to say. That's why you look to the national we had. Okay, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so Brainstorm, they've been doing a lot of great work with GDPR, creating templates and ways to kind of lead the discussion in your companies and in your teams. They've got some really cool stuff coming on that, and they'll be discussing it tomorrow, so definitely check out their session. And yeah, there's a group of folks working around the GDPR module, but I think what we need to think about it as is less of a GDPR module and more of a privacy initiative. Because what we're running into in the US is California stepped in and said, well, GDPR is great, but we're going to put in our own clone of GDPR called the CCPA. And that basically states, here's what privacy looks like in California. Well, what's in California? Silicon Valley. So basically they're regulating Silicon Valley to have certain privacy laws. That'll come in effect in 2 years from now. In true American bravado, the US government doesn't like to be shown up by the states and doesn't like to be told what to do by Europe. That's how we started our whole country. And so the federal government is now getting into it and saying, what can we regulate and how? And I was watching and I'm one of those nerds that actually watches, like the Senate Intel Committee was having discussions with Jack Dorsey and Sheryl Sanders from Facebook and Twitter on specifically around election hacking and what can be done and what disclosures have to be there. And the web's kind of this Wild West space where everyone just kind of does what they want to do, and that's what's that's the beauty of it, is that we can create, we can build anything we want. But at the same time, we're now seeing that has significant impact in not only politics, but in society. So these bot farms that are coming up, they're not just there to push a certain political view. They're actually spinning up discord. They're just picking topics that they know are going to piss off a lot of people, and they'll just put out a bunch of ads around it, or put out a bunch of tweets around it, just because they want to sow that discord in the system and create that. And so now the government is starting to step in the U.S. saying, okay, how do we regulate this? Do we have to, even today I was listening to some discussion around, do we have to break up the big companies, just like they did with the Ma Bell and all the telephone companies in the U.S.? Should we break these large data companies up so that no one company has such control over the population? And there's a lot going on there, and not a lot of answers, I can tell you, but it's discussion that has to occur. So, yeah. All right, so I will post these online. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you around.